11 a.m. for us.
Unmute, that helps. Okay, so thank you for giving me this opportunity. I, love presenting and assisting where I can. I'm going to share my screen with you, do a presentation that I'm going to fly through for two reasons. Number one, because it could be quite detailed and go for a long time. Number two is because I'm looking at who's here, and I think half the people here have seen it already. So, yeah, so let's get started. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, the other thing is I've got screens, overlapping screens. I did this presentation on a small laptop last week and it was really hard to see, so I want to do this on a big screen now. Okay, so one sec, share. So I'm trying as much as possible to look like I'm looking at you, and hopefully I am. So tell me, just give me a bit of a sign if you can see the screen okay, or just let me know. Can you see that okay? Yeah? Okay, great. So I called this presentation Insights into the Rich but Not So Famous, How Money's Being Transferred in Life and Death. I'm doing a lot more work these days with older generation of people who typically have more money than they need in their lifetime and are trying to, or are thinking about ways that they can start to transition money to the next generation in a more tax effective, user friendly kind of a way. So there's a disclaimer, you guys know what that's about. So here we go. What keeps the rich awake at night? Because typically if somebody has more money than they need in their lifetime and they're in their 70s, we're going to classify them as rich. And I mean, these are not necessarily people who are uber wealthy. This is not, $100 million people or $50 million people, but they're people who have, $10, $20 million, maybe in some cases even $5 or $7 million. So there's a lot of emotional stuff that have come out of my discussions with them. And for a lot of them, I mean, no matter how rich someone is and you think they should have nothing to worry about, they worry about their money. And look, I'm talking to a group of financial advisors. I'm very conscious of this. So many of you, and I don't know what your areas of specialties are, but I don't want to also feel like I'm telling you something you already know. But you would have encountered this yourselves as you've had discussions with people throughout the course of your careers. So, what do they think about with their money? Some of them, how they can make more. And for some people, it's like, seriously, like you haven't got enough. You've got more than you need in your life and your purpose is still to try and make more money. For other people, it's about, how their investments can generate more income and, what are the risks with that? Everyone wants safety, security with their investments. They want to earn more, but they don't necessarily want to take the risk for it. They want control of their money. They're worried about running out of money. For some of elderly people, the dealing with their finances and dealing with the discussion around transferring the money to the next generation, it means that they have to accept their own mortality. And for a lot of people, it's very difficult because they don't really want to think that they're not going to be here at some point that's, a little bit more imminent. A lot of them have trust issues. They know they need to do something, that's fine, but they don't trust anyone. They don't trust their own children. They don't trust that their spouses necessarily have capacity to step up and do what they've been doing. And in my experience, it's amazing, how many times I've seen people who've never had the opportunity. They may not have had the interest. They may not have been given the opportunity, but when they've had to take over decision making and financial management, obviously with the support of our relationship, they are amazing in what they're able to do. So lots of issues that the wealthy have with their money. Maybe if they didn't have that much money, they wouldn't have that many worries. But anyway, here's what it is. So I want to go through two case studies. One is, the first one is this Jones family. Obviously, I've changed all the names for protect their privacy, but this gives you a little bit of an insight into the complexity of the work that I'm doing with some families. So in this particular case, we've got Judy Jones. She's a widow. She's 60. Her husband Alan passed away suddenly, 16 years ago. Alan has an adult child who was a child from a previous relationship or previous marriage who lives overseas. Judy and Alan together have 4 children, and those children are aged between 21 and 28, of which at the moment one of those children lives overseas. So Judy's a teacher. She earns about $80,000 a year. She lives off her net income. She owns her own home, which is worth about $3 million, and has other personal assets of around $2 million, also generating around $80,000 a year. So in reality, she could stop working today and her passive investments that are in her name will be adequate to provide an income for her for the remainder of her life without even accessing any capital. Now, in addition, in her name, she's holding in trust for each of her children about $250,000. So there's more financial information here. That's what she had in her own name. Now, there are couple of entities. The bottom entity, because it's easier, we'll start with that one. So she has a self-managed superannuation fund. For the sake of the non-Aussies on here, that's a retirement fund. There's some rules around access, but given that she's now 60, she is able to access some of the funds and do some strategies around her super. So she has got $1.5 million in a combination of cash, term deposits and shares. And then on top of that, there's a death proceeds trust, which is a testamentary trust from her former husband's estate. And that also has, that has about $2.5 million in it, made up of cash and term deposits of $1.3 million and $1.2 million of shares. So she has got $9 million that she's managing. So far, $250,000 is being held in trust for each of the kids. But one of the rules is this testamentary death proceeds trust must be paid out to the children when the youngest child turns 25. It must get paid out. So what are we going to do with her situation? Okay, she came to me and she said, I want to buy 2 properties because properties make money. And then in 5 years from now, when my youngest child, or 4.5 years from now, my youngest child turns 25, we'll split the property and give it to the kids, or the kids can work out what they want to do. So we had a whole conversation about, is this really the most sensible place to start? You want to put 4 kids in ownership of 2 properties. How are we going to equate and equalize the value of them? Which 2 kids are you going to put together? What if another one wants to move overseas? They might be in different life stages at different times, even though they are similar in age. They might be, one might get married and have a family young, another might be single for a long time. Why do you want to start putting your kid, locking them into a growth investment that really is more suited to a longer time frame when you're starting from a clean slate, which was managing the cash? So it got her thinking, particularly when there were implications of stamp duty and other taxes, just getting into the investment, let alone getting out of the investment. So I was able to identify that there are a number of risks there which she agreed are potential problems. And so I gave her an alternative strategy. So I'm just going to go straight into the strategy and let you know what I did for her. So essentially you can see on the screen there that there's 3 entities. There's her self-managed super fund, there's Judith acting as trustee for her children, and then there's this death benefits trust, which is the forward-thinking proprietary limited company that's acting as trustee of the trust. So what we did, the first simplest thing was we tidied up her super fund a little bit, and we took the cash, did an in specie of shares, and we put it into a wrap facility. Okay. The next thing that we did was we took the investment bonds, we took the money from the children's that she's holding in trust for the children, and we put it into investment bonds. Now, one critical thing I forgot to say is before we started any of this, I suggested to her very strongly, which she accepted, is that we have a family meeting with the children, that you have got children now who are adults. They are going to be looking after a lot of money. They need to be given responsibility and they need to be taught responsibility. So let's bring them into the conversation. So After we had a family meeting, including a Zoom call with one of the kids who's overseas, we decided that this money that she's holding in trust for the kids that was really just sitting in term deposits, they can be put into a higher growth strategy. Now, all the kids are already higher income earners because of money coming to their names. They're either non-residents for tax purposes, so that's a consideration, with another child intending to move overseas. Excuse me. So what we did was we said, let's move the funds into an investment bond for each child. You can own it and the kids then can, at the different stages that they require access to the money, the bonds can either be transferred to them, the monies can be liquidated and paid out to them. But in the first instance, their wealth, which is now sitting in a, I don't know if you can see my mouse. I know it's not coming up on the screen there, in a balanced portfolio. So we've given some growth exposure around 70% growth, 30% defensive. In an environment with a maximum tax rate of 30%. So they have full access to their money. They have, if they access the money in the next few years, they'll be paying tax at the marginal tax rate that they would have had to pay if the money was invested in their own name. But we're taking a chance here that what if they don't need to access this money for a long time? If they don't need to access it, then after 10 years, the investment bonds become capital gains tax free. So we've structured their finances in a way that if you need the money anytime sooner, you've got access to it, but the tax implication is what it would have been if it was in your own name. But if you don't need it, you've got there a longer time frame. What we then did with the last entity, which was the testamentary trust, is we started some additional bonds that with a similar amount, but we've put it into a higher growth portfolio. So essentially each of the kids will have 2 bonds, one with a slightly higher growth profile, and ultimately they will have these bonds transferred to them. You will notice that there's a very old grandfather we've got here in the investment bonds in brackets. There's a Benjamin Jones, who's the old grandfather in his 90s. If he dies within the 10 years of the bonds being held, within the first 10 years, then anytime anyone wants to access money from the funds, there again will be no capital gains tax implication. So I won't go into the detail of what a bond is because I haven't got enough time for it, and for the interest of also for the non-Aussies here that it might not be relevant for. The purpose, the summary, I guess, and the purpose is I've structured the money for them in a way that leaves them with a lot of choices and options for if they need the money sooner or if they need the money later. Now, the grandfather is starting to liquidate his investments and he wants to start handing money over to the children. We've already got the infrastructure set up for monies to be added to this, okay, so that wealth can be transferred, skip a generation, like skip the mum and go straight to the kids in an environment that has already got some tax benefits to it. So this is the first case study. Excuse me. The second one is the Adams family. Now this is much more interesting. Okay. So we've got Letitia and Hermes, who are already in their late 70s and 80. They've been married for 56 years and they've got 4 children. Their children are all very different with very different needs. So their oldest is a daughter who is a was till last week a very super wealthy widow. She's actually just remarried a man who's divorced with a number of children. So she's very wealthy. They've got a son who's married with 8 children from 6 to 25. They live interstate. He's a high income earner, but he is struggling to meet his lifestyle and he cannot meet his mortgage repayments. They've got another son who lives overseas. You can see the info there. And then they've got a daughter who's the youngest daughter who's got a number of mental health issues. She will never be able to responsibly look after money. So Letitia herself, even though she's older, she still teaches part-time and she loves it. and Hermes is retired and he's starting to show some early signs of dementia. They need about $10,000 a month to live off, and they have been assisting their son for the last year and a half with $7,500 a month mortgage repayments. They own their own home, that's $2.5 million, and they have no other personal assets, but of course they have investment assets. So they have 2 family trusts. Each of the family trusts had a property in them, a pre-capital gains tax property, and some investments that we've already cleaned up for them, and they've got a self-managed super fund. Now, in that first family trust, they had a property that was worth about $1.6 million. And we looked at what this property was actually doing for them, and the property was generating them about $50,000 of income. And I said to them, look, we're at a point where you've already helped one kid with about over $90,000. At what point are you going to start thinking about whether you need to equalise their estate with the other children? Because if you don't want this kid to lose his house, he is going to be, you're paying $100,000 a year to support this child. And they said, and look, it's not my place to say you must equalise. If you want to give all your money to one kid and deal with the consequences of that, that's their choice. But as you know, part of what we do is stand back, be objective, and raise implications for people to consider. So they said, yep, it's an issue. We want to help our son. We do not want him to lose his house, but what can we do? So I said, well, look, you've got this property, this commercial property, which was really a dive. Okay, it had come to the end of its life as a commercial property. The next step for it is development, and they cannot develop it, full stop. So I said to them, look, if all you're getting from this property is $50,000 a year, we know that we can invest $1 million and get $50,000 a year of income, which means that there's an excess of $650,000 that they can already utilise towards their helping the son who needs the mortgage repayments covered. So hold that thought, and I'll take you in just a moment into the strategy. So here we've got a pool of assets of $11.6 million, kids with a variety of different needs. They want to equalise what they're doing for their children, but at the moment there's one particular child that needs a lot of help. Interestingly, their son, one of their sons, the one who lives overseas, called me last week and said, look, I know you helped my parents. I don't know what my parents' financial situation is, but I've got to tell you, I've had a really, really good year this year. And if my parents need help, I'd love to be able to help them. And I thought, that's hilarious because they don't need help. But it was nice. It was very heartwarming that the son, that he was thinking to help his parents. Anyway, let's go into the strategy. I'm conscious of time. So what happened with what we did with their wealth, and this is something that I've been working on with these people for, it's an 18-month or more implementation program. What we did was we said, okay, Family Trust 1. Oh, and by the way, this was done in conjunction with their solicitor and with their accountant. So we were all checking in with each other every step of the way. So what we did was we liquidated the family trust, the first family trust, because we sold up that property. It really was going to start to cost them a lot of money. It didn't make sense. Real estate agents' advice, we got rid of it. So we liquidated the trust. We put the money into their bank account, and the self-managed super fund we retained. We then are left now with family trust number 2, and this is where all the action is happening. Okay, so we liquidated the family trust, put money in the bank account. The self-managed super fund, SMSF, has to pay a minimum pension. So there's a bit of money that comes into their joint bank account from the SMSF. Next thing we did was I took an amount of cash and I put it into a moderately conservative portfolio, because this is the account that is going to pay their regular income. Their $10,000 a month, you'll see in a moment, for their living expenses will come out of that account. We then set up 4 investment bonds for each of the children, equal amounts for each of the children, $400,000 each, because each child is unique with their own needs. High income, foreign resident, another high income, mental health issues. So the bonds that I actually use Generation Life bonds, and they have the ability to be transferred at a future event, but they also have the ability to not be transferred, but pay out a specified income for the remainder of someone's life, so that there is a little bit of controlling that you can do with the wealth. It does not form part of someone's estate. From what I understand, no one has ever successfully been able to challenge an investment bond structure, because it falls under the Life Act. And the use of bonds is another effective estate planning tool if you want to segregate or quarantine, which is a bad word now, investments from an estate. So we put that into a growth portfolio because it's not anticipated that the kids are going to need the money for a long time. But this is the parents, if they need the money themselves, they can access it at any point. And this is a long-term pool of funds that they can access money from. If it's long-term, might as well be invested with some higher growth. Then we set up the last investment bond number 5. Now, this bond was for the son who lives interstate, who needs help with the mortgage. This bond was set up as a way of segregating a lump sum of money to say, rather than helping you along the way and adding up 7.5 plus 7.5, or every year 90 plus 90 plus 90, we said, let's start with a set fixed amount. And this is, even though ideally bonds should not have money taken out of them, they do enable monies to be taken out. And the money that gets taken out, you can see there's $7,500 a month. That goes back into the family, into this family trust cash account. The cash account then puts $17,500 a month into the parents' account, like the client's account. $10,000 they retain for their own investment purposes. $7,500 they then gift to their son. So because the parents are very low tax, they have very low tax rates themselves, they take the money, it's split between the husband and wife, then they gift it to the son who's not looking for more income at the moment. Now, the last step then in the process is, I said, okay, this is my great strategy. I'm happy to do this for you, but you want to equalise your estate, that's fine. We need to document this somewhere. It needs to be documented somewhere official. So we'd already got their estate planning, their wills done. So we got the lawyer to draft an agreement where every party, so the son-in-law, and the son, the daughter-in-law, and the parents all signed an agreement acknowledging that $650,000 of that bond has been advanced to this child and comes off the estate, their estate, when the parents die. The parents were not really interested in doing a calculation of bring forward, what is the present value or current value. They just said, look, we'll keep it at 650 flat, fine. But the kids know, if this money gets used up, it's used up. If they suddenly get a windfall from some other place, or they figure out how they can afford their loan, so be it. And if there's anything left, they get it. Whatever happens to that 650, they get the benefit or the detriment of. Okay. Well, it'll always be a benefit because it goes to their mortgage. But they have signed in advance that they have taken an advance on their share of the estate. Every party signed it. So it's fairly, straightforward. I mean, it looks on it when it's on the sheet like that. But I'm just reading the comments now. Cherry wants to be one of her kids. Okay, cool. It's probably the earlier strategy. But that is the end of what has been going on with these people. Now, these people they are related to me. It's not my direct family, thank God, but they are related to me. And so they've given me a lot of trust and insight. And I can tell you that what we did for them includes even going in and setting up filing. So I didn't do this, I got someone to do it. Set up filing so they can put paperwork away. The wife has not been able to vacuum in that room for years. So There's a lot of work that's gone in. As I said, this strategy's 18 months, but there's stuff that we did before that. So I asked people, who wants to be a millionaire? These are the sort of issues you have to deal with. Does anyone really want to be a millionaire? So that's the end of my presentation. Like I said, I can see how much time I've used, but I could be talking about this